Hi, Lauren.
Hey, Shannon.
Welcome back to What They Don't Say, where we talk about sexual assault,
Relationships,
rape,
therapy,
online resources,
laws and legislation, baby.
and everything in between. So today, guys, we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We're in a different environment. We're in my room. I don't want to hear anything about the fact that there's no decor.
No one cares.
Nobody cares. Because you know what people do care about, Lauren? Sexual assault statistics.
Yes.
Today, we're going to dive in a little bit deeper to kind of like what sexual assault looks like in the United States, some recent laws that have been passed, as well as some resources for you guys. And Lauren did a bunch of research. We are lawyers. We are not your lawyers. We are not professionals.
Did you say we are lawyers?
we
are lawyers.
We are not.
But we're not your lawyer.
Sorry. I fucked up.
That was funny.
One of my favorite podcasts that I listen to, that's what he says, because he's actually a lawyer, but he's like, we're lawyers. We are not your lawyers. Anyways, we are not lawyers. We are also not your lawyers. So everything we say today, it has been backed up with statistics, but don't like quote us or anything.
Yeah.
And Lauren is going to be teaching us. I don't know anything about what she's going to say. I'm just going to sit here and ask questions and represent you guys while she is the professor.
You. Okay, yeah. So basically, the inspo for this was that I was sitting in I'm a policy master's student, and I was sitting in one of my classes, and we were looking at California legislation, and a bunch of different bills have been passed in the past like week or so.
Excuse me.
That was cute.
So Lauren's first factoid of information today is...
So, California, they just passed some pieces of legislation. Pretty cool too. But one of them is to help rape kits become much more accessible to college students.
What's a rape
Big
kit?
win. Well, Shannon, considering you have done a rape kit, I think that you should talk us through that.
Okay, I can do that. I was asking the question because I'm like, I'm the people. I'm the people and you are the professor. But okay, essentially a rape kit is what happens when you go to the hospital, either right after being sexually assaulted or a few days after, and they document everything. You give a statement. They take pictures of your body. If you have any bruises, they measure them. And then they do an entire vaginal exam. So they will go in, they will do swabs, like DNA swabs and all of that. They'll look at your cervix, and they will get as much information and data, I guess you can say, as they possibly can, so that if you decide to pursue a court case, then they have as much of that DNA evidence as well as other evidence. That's a rape kit.
Cool.
And they're really fucking expensive, but we don't need to talk about that right now.
We love the United States healthcare system. Okay, so essentially what this bill is going to do is it's going to take effect next year, so 2025 to 2026. And the bill will require public universities, so looking at like UC schools, University of California schools, to partner with relevant existing on-campus organizations. The legislation does not specify what organization, so that will just depend from school to school. Together, they will provide free assistance in a manner that protects student confidentiality and gives access to transportation to and from a local sexual assault forensic examination or sexual assault abuse response team exam center, according to the legislation.
So are these centers already made? Do we know?
Yeah.
Or okay.
They
That's
already
really
exist.
Cool. I didn't know that.
But maybe students just like don't have a way to get there, or maybe they need assistance in that. They could be in a fragile state, things like that. So it's really just to ensure that everyone can access these rape kits if need be.
And then in turn, hopefully there will be more justice, because if more people are able to get the evidence, then in theory there might be more convictions. That's dope. Okay.
Yes, exactly.
I like this. Fact number 2.
But building off of that, a huge problem within the justice system and ensuring that perpetrators actually get consequences is that rape kit backlog is currently one of the biggest obstacles to prosecuting perpetrators of sexual violence. So even if you are getting a DNA kit done or a rape kit done, that is still a huge barrier, essentially. So there's just like a huge backlog. There's so many that needs to be done. Sometimes they can take years to actually get tested. And then that like doesn't mean anything for your court case. And so that's been a huge barrier for survivors of sexual assault. But luckily, there are a few acts that have been passed in the past 20 years to help with this. The first one being the Debbie Smith Act, which was passed in 2004. And this is basically to ensure that your rape kit actually does get tested. And this was based off of a case where a woman was raped and then her DNA testing didn't get tested for like 5 years. So they couldn't use it in court. And that's a huge piece of evidence. And that's so vital to ensuring that consequences are going to happen. And she just didn't get that. So they passed an act in 2005 that ensures that will happen.
So you within 5 years is what you're saying, which still it might not happen soon enough. 5 years feels like a very long time.
So it's not about a year thing. Basically how they're ensuring that like your rape kit will actually be tested is just by providing more funding. I think one of the biggest issues is that these areas don't have enough funding. So this act provides funding for crime labs to process more DNA evidence.
I wonder, it's probably processed by machine, maybe. So maybe they're paying for more machines to process
more
faster.
Staff members.
More staff. Okay. I mean, I don't really know how DNA is
resources.
processed.
I don't really know either, honestly.
But AKA they're either paying for more machines because they have more funding or paying for more staff because they have more funding.
Yeah. But what's really cool is that this has an overwhelming amount of bipartisan support. And it provides up to $151 million per year in funding. And then to top that, the SAFER Act was passed in 2013, which has raised the minimum amount of funding that must go to testing and capacity building activities. So this act is something that has been actively builded upon and ensuring more funding goes into this so that rape kits can be tested to go into trial evidence.
What fact are we on now? Fact 3? Fact 4?
I think 3.
Okay. Fact 3. Give it to me.
I'm going to drop some stats. And I just want to preface this with, these are fucked. And they're awful. But I think it's important to understand these numbers because I think a lot of people don't understand how common sexual assault is. And there is a high chance that you know many people that have been assaulted. And I think that like both of us have experienced this where, you know, I'll be having a really bad day and then I'll finally tell one of my friends like, hey, like, yeah, like I was sexually assaulted and it impacts me in X, Y, and Z ways. And then they'll be like, oh yeah, that's also happened to me. And you kind of realize, holy shit, like I'm really not alone in this. So many other people have gone through this. It's really sad and heartbreaking, but I really do think it's important to drill in what is the state of the state when it comes to these things.
Where'd you get these facts?
RAINN. The Rape, Abuse, and Incest Network, National Network.
Okay. Statistic number 1, go.
Someone is assaulted every 68 seconds.
Which means that someone has probably like 10 people have been assaulted since we started this video.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. That is so...
It's sad, but it's real. It's just like, this is the fact of the fucking matter. Like when the rubber meets the road, it's horrific. Okay, statistic number 2, go.
80% of survivors know they're rapists.
So what I'm hearing is that it's more likely to be assaulted or raped by someone that I know than it is for me to be pulled out of an alleyway and assaulted in a dumpster.
Yes. I mean, obviously people do get raped by strangers, but 80%. It is much more common to get raped by someone you know. And obviously both me and Shannon were raped by someone we knew very well, and that was very close to our family. And that happens to be just like a lot more common than you might think. And if you are interested in learning more about survivor stories and just the justice system in general, I would definitely check out the book Missoula by John Krakauer. He basically wrote an entire book about all these different survivor stories in Missoula, Montana, University of Montana, and about how like fucked up the justice system was there. And it creates a lot of very personal stories that do tie into the systemic issues that we're facing. So if you are interested in like looking more into that and understanding more, I think that's an excellent book, and it's a really great read. It's really sad, but very well written and very well researched.
We'll put it in the description below too.
Yes.
So, okay, statistic number 3.
60,000 children are assaulted every year.
60,000?
Mm-hmm.
So I have a question.
Okay.
So if someone is sexually assaulted and they're a minor, are they molested? Or, because it's all sexual, like sexual assault is a blanket term for like anything from digital penetration all the way to like penile penetration or penetration of an object, as well as like inappropriate, unwanted touching. But molestation, I've always kind of wondered, is that specifically for younger children? Does it mean it has to be like an actual object is penetrating? She's Googling it. We are getting this information live.
Okay, so to clarify, molestation is the crime of engaging in sexual acts with a minor. So
Just period. So anybody under 18.
Yeah.
Glad we cleared that up. Okay.
The more you know.
Statistic number 4.
Nearly 500,000 Americans aged 12 and older are sexually assaulted each year.
Wait, can you say that one more time?
Nearly 500,000 Americans aged 12 and older are sexually assaulted each year.
That's quite a lot of people. Quite a lot of children. Quite a lot of adults.
I wonder why it's age 12 and up.
I imagine that it's probably very hard to track below age 12. Because I imagine that there's so little education about sexual assault before the ages, but probably before the age of like 14, that, you know, if you're under the age of 12, you know, you can't advocate for yourself at all. If something happens, you might not even realize that it's sexual assault or anything like that. So I imagine that it's just literally not being tracked.
Yeah. I also wonder if the statistics increase from like the ages of like 12 and up. I don't know if I'm saying this right, but like maybe like women are more likely, or like girls are more likely to be assaulted ages like 12 and up or something like that, because they're going through puberty and now they have like boobs. They're like of age and they're like they have boobs and, you know, things like that. And pheromones. Then that is like more, I guess, attractive to like a perpetrator. And
that made me feel gross on the inside.
I know, I didn't like that.
I didn't like that.
But I think like it is true in a way that maybe, you know, as girls get into like their teenage years, they are more likely to become victims of sexual assault crimes. Who knows? I don't know. That could be wrong. I'm just speculating, but I do wonder.
Yeah, we're just giving you the facts here. We don't know the reasons why. We don't know the reasons behind the facts, but we can speculate. So, okay. Statistic number 5. 4 or 5. I lost count.
1 in 6 American women is a survivor of rape or attempted rape.
So, for some clarity, rape versus sexual assault. This is like a big question mark in my mind, because as you probably noticed on our podcast, we use the word rape and sexual assault pretty interchangeably.
There's a difference in perception when you use the word rape versus if you use the word sexual assault. And I feel like when people hear rape, they do think of you being brutally beaten, like while penetration is happening. Whereas sexual assault, I think that it can be misinterpreted to like, oh, you were sexually assaulted. Oh, someone touched you.
Someone grazed your butt.
Or something like that. And I think that's a huge misconception. And people don't understand what that word means and the weight that it holds. But if you say, oh, I was raped, then they're like, oh, shit, something really fucking bad happened to you. But if you say like, oh, I was sexually assaulted, people are like, oh. Huh.
So I guess the issue is that, well, the distinction of the words, there actually is a difference between the two words. Like
from a legal standpoint.
From a legal standpoint, as well as a definition standpoint.
Also, the definition changes state by state.
Of rape?
Yeah, in sexual assault.
Also, it changes via military or civilian court, because we were not allowed to say the word rape when we were in court, because he was not being charged with rape. He was being charged with sexual assault, with sexual assault via digital penetration, via penile penetration, all of those different things. Because in the military, rape has to be like sexual assault with use of extreme force. I'm pretty sure it is. So yeah, there is a difference between rape and sexual assault. And so what the statistic that you just shared is that 90% of rape survive. Wait, no, shit.
I said 1 in 6 American women is a survivor of rape or attempted rape.
Yeah. So meaning they are survivors of potential brutal sexual assault with extreme force, maybe. That's how I would interpret that statistic.
I would interpret it as 1 in 6 American women is a survivor of sexual assault.
Wow, pop off. I agree. That was better than mine. Okay, we'll go with yours. That was much better than mine.
Okay.
Next
Cool.
statistic.
90% of rape survivors are female.
Whoa. Now, 10% are men. Okay, that's what that statistic says. However, I would be, this is like the most updated statistic that you could find on it.
Mm-hmm.
I would be curious to know if the reason it's 90% and not a little bit more equal, excuse me,
Cute.
was because a lot of men don't talk about being sexually assaulted. Like we have been in a room with like 5 other guys, and 3 out of the 5 had said, oh yeah, I had sex. Like I woke up one time and this girl was just having sex with me on top of me and I wasn't okay with it. And I just like let it happen because like, whatever. And I would say, oh, that's crazy because you were sexually assaulted. And they'd say, no one will believe us because we're just guys and guys are supposed to love having sex. So, which that was rape, or sexual assault, not consensual sex. But I just think that statistic you just shared is probably, there's a higher percentage of men we just don't know because it's not normalized for them to speak up about it.
Yeah, I would agree. And I do think that's a really big problem. And it is unfortunate that as a society, we don't allow for safe spaces where men and women can talk about these things. And that's like part of the reason why we're here today. But I would also keep in mind that there is a very high percentage of women who don't report or talk about the fact that they're sexually assaulted, especially because our society tends to go on the side of men. And they just think that they won't be believed or they'll be shamed or people will blame them or nothing will be done about it. Their perpetrator will get off scot-free. Like there's just nothing will happen. So even though there probably is a high percentage of men who don't report, there's also a very high percentage of women who don't report. So it's really complicated and I feel like it's a huge gray area because you really just don't know.
Okay, next statistic.
More than half of sexual assaults occur at or near the survivor's home.
So more than 50%.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
That's actually really interesting because I always thought like in our cases, we both were sexually assaulted in, well, I guess your home, but like that was kind of like my home at the time as well.
Yeah.
And I always thought that was like weird. I was always like, oh, like I feel like that probably doesn't happen that often or.
I thought it was weird. I agree with
Yeah.
you.
And so I'm actually like kind of surprised to know that is super common. But I guess that makes sense too because like, I don't know, I think about a lot of, I guess, college rape cases where you're like living in a dorm or something like that, or like maybe really near campus and you like bring a guy home. And so like you're in your own home and it happens to you. Or maybe you're like at a dorm that's like near your dorm and it happens to you. So I guess like from kind of around our age, that totally makes sense. And I guess like if you have been assaulted when you were younger, it might have like high chances it was someone that was very close like with your family or an adult and it happened like in your own home. So I guess upon thinking about it, that totally checks out. But for some reason, I always was like, it's so weird that we were assaulted like in our beds kind of thing. Like, you know what? I don't know.
So what was the percentage of for how many people are assaulted by someone they know?
80% of survivors.
So if 80% of people know their rapist, it probably means that that person is going to be near their house more often or hanging out in like, places closer to their home, maybe like restaurants or, a park near their house, things like that. And so if 80% know their rapist, then that also means, and then you have the more than half occur in or near the house. It's just simply because that's where you're hanging out. Like, if you know them, you don't expect them to be a rapist. It's like, psych, bitch, I'm going to assault you. That was not on the bingo card, you know? So I think it makes sense, but it's also weird because, or I think that it feels weird that it's so common in people's houses because we look at sexual assault as this thing of it's in the alleyway. Like, even if you've been sexually assaulted, it's like, it wasn't supposed to be in my house. It wasn't supposed to be by someone I know. I was always told it's supposed to be by someone in the middle of the night in an alleyway that I've never met before. But that's the narrative that we've told ourselves. But the reality is 80% of people know they're rapist. Over 50% of people are going to be assaulted by that person in the place that they feel most comfortable because that's what they have access to. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That was my thought.
Love it. Okay, I'm going to move on.
Next statistic.
This is looking more now at the justice system. 975 out of every 1,000 perpetrators will walk free. And that's like, I feel like a hard stat to digest because it basically says that, hey, your odds of like going to jail or getting consequences for raping someone are super low. So you might as well go out and do it. That's
the reason why people don't want to go through a court case, because it's like, why would I put myself through, you know, a year, 2, 3, 4, 5 years of reliving being assaulted, having to talk about this, being absolutely being absolutely destroyed by a defense attorney for somebody not to actually get convicted.
Right.
Like, that statistic just proves, you're probably fucked, so you might as well just not try.
I think it's super disheartening and you kind of like lose hope.
Next statistic. Ready, set, go.
Okay, so I think it's also important to understand that, yes, there's a high amount of perpetrators who walk free, but the amount of sexual assaults that are reported to the police is extremely low. It's only 310 out of 1,000.
Whoa.
Mm-hmm. So if there's not a lot that are being reported, then obviously it's a higher chance that perpetrators will walk free. But we have to remember, okay, but why are they not being reported? Why do people not feel comfortable to report this or go to the police or take it to their Title IX office at college or whatever it may be? And so I kind of like looked into that, and a few of the reasons were, some women especially feared retaliation. They worried that their perpetrator was going to hurt them. And I think that, like, obviously makes sense. I know that Shannon talked about that a little bit. Not exactly retaliation, but just like worrying that they were going to like show up somewhere that they know you go, or just,
and scare you kind of out of continuing with some sort of case.
And it does happen.
Absolutely.
And that's what's really unfortunate. Also, many people believe that the police just would not or could not do anything about it. And once again, this just kind of goes to show that we are used to living in a society that doesn't put value on ensuring that these people will go to prison. And so I also know from like a college standpoint, I worked with one of our sexual assault organizations on my campus, and I talked to a lot of girls who did report getting sexually assaulted, and our school did nothing about it. They were like, hey, can you put them in a different class? Can you put them in a different dorm? And they were like, oh, well, we don't want to disrupt their life, so we're not going to do that. And
so it's kind of crazy because they actually really disrupted mine by raping me.
Yeah. So it's like this really interesting thing of like, you're not even asking to go through a court process. You were literally just like, can you remove them from being around me every single day? And our campus said no, because they were worried about disrupting this guy's life after he had raped a girl, and they wouldn't do shit about it. And so a lot of girls talked to me about that, where they were like, well, I heard this one girl, she reported it and they didn't help her out at all. They didn't provide any support. And even if they did provide support, it was really minimal and it was bullshit. And so I think that's also a huge thing for college age students of like, they're not going to do anything. And a lot of the perpetrators were on sports teams.
Oh, well, that's kind of the same thing that happened in the Chanel Miller case, right?
Right. Yeah.
He was the swimmer. He
going to
was
go to the
golden
Olympics.
Boy, and then he got 6 months And it was like, well, now granted, she didn't go to Stanford, but I can imagine if you're on the sports team, obviously you're one of the reasons that a university is making a lot of money, right? And so it's like, well, we can't disrupt that because as a university, we're going to prioritize how much money we're bringing in from our sports team and all of these men, and making sure that like if we, if university sets an example, then it might have, quote unquote, bigger detriments to them in the long run because, the women will just stay quiet then.
Yeah. And there's also just like especially at a school where you have like maybe a really good sports team, like for us, our really good sports team was our baseball team. And so they just thought that they were the shit and they were better than everyone else and they could get away with anything. And so a lot of the list of guys who assaulted women were on the baseball team. But our baseball team, they were like golden boys, like everyone like kneeled down at their feet, they have like won so many college World Series, whatever. And so they knew that they could probably get away with a shit ton. And those girls who were raped probably knew, hey, like I could say something about this, but no one's going to do anything because they're on the fucking baseball team and the baseball team makes us money.
So why try?
Yeah. So it's very unfortunate.
Next statistic.
Well, actually, I was going to add on to this. Another reason, and I think this is really interesting because I did this, that someone did not, or people did not report, was they did not want the perpetrator to get in trouble.
Dude, this one is crazy.
Yeah.
Because this really feeds into the like denial aspect of it, I think. I think it's all kind of connected. If you are like, well, that didn't really happen, or maybe I had said yes, like slightly with my left shoulder or whatever, and then you're like, well, we're going to press charges or something, then it's like, well, no, but it'll disrupt his life. And it wasn't really sexual assault or it wasn't really rape. So I don't want to disrupt his life for something that like wasn't really that. But it's just like, hey, bitch, wake the fuck up. You were assaulted. He did something wrong.
Yeah. I mean, I think you convince yourself that like, well, I don't know, just like in the society we live in, we're taught to like put a lot of blame on ourselves and to keep quiet. So we think, oh, maybe this wasn't how it was, or maybe it was my fault. So I don't want to like do anything because I'll get this person in trouble. But like, it was probably my fault. I was drinking. Like you just try to justify it so hardcore. And it's just, you can't do that. Like it happened to you. You have to come to terms with that, which can be really hard. But you have to understand that it's a crime and that person needs to have consequences, especially so they don't do it to more women.
Another thing is, I think we, specifically women, we do tend to put these kind of men on a pedestal in a way. And so like for us, it's this person who is about to graduate from the Air Force Academy and he's going to be an officer and all this. And so he's, like serving our country. And so, if he ends up in jail because, we pursue a court case, then I'm taking all of that away from him. Like you look at them as a person because that's what they are, but you forget about like how big of a deal the act was, the crime that they committed. And so it's like, yeah, I don't want to get my perpetrator in trouble, but you're forgetting how big of a deal it is for someone to violate you like that.
Yeah. Also from like, just like a kind of general public standpoint, have you ever noticed the reaction of a guy when you say, I put a man in prison?
Oh, no, because I haven't really, that's never how I phrase it. I usually start with, hey, I'm going to let you know I've been sexually assaulted. If I cry, blah, blah, this is why. And then sometimes down the road, I get to the line of like, I put a man in prison. But then I remember I didn't put a man in prison. He put himself there. But anyways, so you were saying the look on a man's face when you say you put a man in jail.
Yeah, even if you say why, they look at you like you're a monster. You can literally be like, yeah, I was sexually assaulted. I went through a court trial and it ended with this guy being put in prison. And then they look at you and they're like probably just thinking, oh my God, is she going to put me in prison? Literally go fuck yourself if you believe that.
That's a good that's a good point. Men tend to be a little bit afraid that like you're just gonna, oh, if you did it once, you can just like put more men in prison.
Yeah, like or we're gonna make something up or like lie about something or like I do think this goes with like lack of education. Like I just don't think a lot of guys know what sexual assault means. So like I know in like my like last relationship, he like my ex like did not understand what it meant. And so for him, he was like, oh well, like sometimes we've had sex like after we've been drinking. Like I thought that like maybe you would take that as like a really bad thing and like go and like report that or some shit. And I was looking at him, I was like, the fuck? Like what? Like no, like that's not like he literally just didn't understand that there's a difference between like drinking and having like sex and then like lack of consensual sex.
Yeah.
Which isn't the case all the time. But like obviously every time we had sex, it was very consensual. But he like didn't understand what that even meant. And so he was like afraid that because I've done it before, like I could do it again to him.
Really weird.
It was super weird. And like, I don't even think I like phrased that well, but it's just like this like lack of awareness and understanding that he had that made it seem like
putting someone in jail.
Sexual assault is something that it's not. And you can just go like throw someone in jail if they like do so. I don't even know. It was just super odd.
But I think these statistics today really prove that, you know, such a few percentage of people actually get convicted. The majority of them do walk free. It's not this whole thing of just flippantly reporting and then it just somehow somebody ends up in jail. Like it's a very serious process. It's a very lengthy process and it's a very intentional process to go through. It's not like you report it and then like, oh, they're just behind bars. Like, no, a lot of things need to happen in order to get to that point. Yeah, I tried to explain why sexual assault is so bad to Lauren's ex once. That was a weird conversation, but not a conversation for this episode.
It seems like it wasn't very effective.
I don't know, because you're not dating him anymore, so I don't really see him.
Thank God. Good riddance. Sayonara.
Adios.
Adios, motherfucker.
Okay,
well...
Want to share one more statistic?
Kind of.
Oh, backtrack.
This is what I want to end on. I want to end on talking about the fact that these things happen and it's really heartbreaking. But if they do, it's really important to understand what your rights are. And so we are going to paste a link with this episode. And it's kind of this cool website that shows like a map of the United States. And you can like click on the state that you live in and it'll show you exactly what your rights are if you are a survivor or something like this were to happen to you. And
when you mean rights, what do you mean by that?
So for some states, they call it like the Survivor Bill of Rights, which is kind of cool. And it lays it all out there. For example, like Washington has one that was created. And it basically is like the right to have a sexual assault evidence collection kit or its probative contents preserved without charge.
So it would be free.
Yes.
That's lit.
So it's something like that. Or the right to be informed in writing of policies governing the kit's collection and preservation. So it's kind of things like that. It does vary state by state. So like check out your state, what it is. But it's important to know that because you want to know what you can and can't do essentially. So we'll put that down below so that people can access that. The website that I found is called Rise Now, and it's a really great database. It also has a lot of other great resources that you can look through.
Yeah, that's super important because if you've been sexually assaulted, you might not have any idea, like, what do I do next? What sort of resources are available to me? Like, maybe you can't afford to get a rape kit. They're, like I was saying earlier, they're about $5,000 before insurance. After insurance, $3,000. So, you know, I don't have $3,000. Do you have $3,000?
Yeah, but it looks like it depends on what state you're in because Washington, you can get them for free.
Yeah. So, you know, check out the resource if you've been sexually assaulted or if you're just like curious about it and feel like you want to learn more about the topic in general. I liked today's episode. I feel
it was
like
different, but I think this stuff is necessary to look into. It's, you know, maybe a little bit on the drier side, but it's important to know what you can do. And it's also important to know what people can't do. Okay.
And it's also important to know how frequent this is happening. And if you have thought, oh, this isn't that big of a deal, you know, this doesn't happen that much, I hope that today's episodes really shed some light on how big of a fucking deal this is, how common this is. And, you know, this is an epidemic, is what I would say. It's
I'd agree.
traveling all over the country, and it doesn't really look like it's slowing down at any point soon. So,
gotta keep fighting.
Thank you guys so much for listening to What They Don't Say. See you on the next episode, and we'll catch you on the flip side.
Cheers, y'all.
Cheers.